Dallas Cowboys fans, Cowboy Nation. Today, I'm just going to wrap up and recap pretty much that final day, day 3 of the NFL draft and the undrafted free agents, the undrafted rookie free agents the Dallas Cowboys brought in. Obviously, we have seen so many different opinions on what the Cowboys did during the draft. I've seen some good, I'm talking about national media as well, national analysts. I've seen some good grades. I've seen some grades, so, whatever. And especially among the Dallas Cowboys fan base, you have a lot of people that were happy with the, I guess you want to say, the focus on physicality and getting better in the trenches, getting better, again, just adding a linebacker, adding some more pieces that we actually are going to need, to me personally, in my personal opinion, if the Cowboys are going to just improve on some of the weak spots from last season. But also, you saw some people kind of up in the air, not really as happy and kind of disappointed because you didn't get in those skill positions. I felt personally, obviously, running back was a need for this team because you just had to get a different change of look. You already knew we were talking about the situation where you're looking at the Cowboys bringing in a guy potentially in an Ezekiel Elliott, but then you're looking at obviously who's still on the roster: Rico Dowdle, Deuce Vaughn, I believe Malik Davis. You're starting to look and go into the practice squad, and obviously Dallas Cowboys had a few places and that they could have kind of gone with that running back position during the draft, but then Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, they talked about it after the draft. Some of the running backs that were on board, they wanted to pick a running back in multiple rounds, but there were a couple guys on their own board that was still left available that they kind of had graded a little bit higher, and they felt they were going to be much more of a need, or more, I'm going to say at least much more contributing factors to this upcoming season. So we'll see exactly what the Cowboys do with the running back position, but apparently we're going to have to now lock in the trenches. And let's talk about the trenches a little bit. The Dallas Cowboys also in day 3 took a couple extra pieces that are going to help with this team, I'm going to say, because Cowboys brought in a cornerback, Kalen Carson. They brought in Nathan Thomas, I believe, offensive lineman from the University of Louisiana, I believe. You're looking at a Justin Rogers, I believe, from the University of Auburn, a defensive tackle in the 7th round. And also, when you're talking about what the Cowboys are going to bring in, the number one thing you're focused on is just people that are actually going to be able to add a new culture. Obviously, what we've seen many times throughout the Cowboys, I guess you want to say these last years, you could honestly go back to say decades at this point. The Cowboys, it starts to always become a country club type of environment. Of course, people feel like sometimes they can overstep the head coach, go talk to Jerry if they have any issues. And to me, some of these things are always continuing to build and throw themselves together and cause some of the issues that I feel the Cowboys have. To me, there's not always a big focus, major focus on attention to detail. It doesn't matter who the coaching staff is. We bring in new coaches, new guys. The Cowboys have got to just lock in guys that are going to be hard-nosed, physical. And I feel like that's what we did with this draft. Let's talk about a few of these pieces that the Cowboys did bring in day 3 of the NFL draft. A guy I'm going to say, obviously, the Dallas Cowboys, unfortunately, did not have a 4th-round pick, used it in that Trey Lance trade with the San Francisco 49ers last season. But in the 5th round, they did take cornerback Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest, the 4-year player at Wake Forest. He dealt with some injuries here and there. I believe ends up with about 3 interceptions over his career. But last season, I think he had 42 total tackles. So and if you're watching him on film, this is a guy who's very willing to be a run stopper, a run tackler. Because sometimes you have to worry about that with cornerbacks. They're trying to sometimes make as Deion Sanders would say, a business decision. And sometimes when you're looking at corners, I'm more focused on guys that have no issue with being physical and throwing their body at these these runners or ball carriers when the time calls for it. I'm also going to say, when you watch Kalen Carson, from Wake Forest, we're talking about, this is a guy I feel like he could be kind of like one of those sneaky picks. This is going to be a guy I'm very interested in just kind of keep an eye on during training camp. Because when you're watching Kalen Carson, he is rangy. He's way more rangy than I feel like the 5th-round pick kind of calls for. And we've seen what Deron Bland has been for the team and being a former 5th-round pick himself. This is a guy, obviously, he's going to be raw, and we're still having to figure out what exactly the cornerback room is going to look like. Trayvon Diggs is returning from injury. You're looking at a guy like Deron Bland. Let's see what he's going to do in year 3. Now having real expectations. I don't see him being that guy as if the Cowboys are going to move him back on the inside. They could, because it's also still kind of up in the air what exactly we're going to see from a guy like Jordan Lewis, because the Cowboys have got to figure out what the cornerback depth is going to look like, because you kind of heard, again, a little bit when the season ended, the Cowboys might have been interested in bringing back a guy like Stephon Gilmore, but as of right now, I believe he's still unsigned, and I have not really seen or heard anything about the Cowboys looking to add Stephon Gilmore back to the mix. It could be still up in the air. We'll see how this goes. And again, I'm not talking about Kalen Carson being a guy that's going to come in year 1 and give you even what Deron Bland gave you, due to some injuries, obviously, when Deron Bland got his chance rookie season. But this is a guy, I feel like the Cowboys have a few things to work with. You're talking about Al Harris. You have some guys that have some familiarity with some of these rangy type corners, and I'm looking for a guy like Kalen Carson, just the development that he could potentially bring going into maybe year 2, year 3 of his career with the Dallas Cowboys. But this could be a guy, you're talking about guys falling off the books, and you might, if you end up letting a guy like Jordan Lewis go, you could find a guy like Kalen Carson, because I feel like he has the potential, honestly, to play a little bit on the inside, because at Wake Forest, you saw him sometimes, he played a lot on the outside, the boundary, and I feel like he's very versatile when it comes to man zone, things like that. So this is a guy at some points you did see him play a little bit of the slot corner. So we do know in the NFL it's a whole different game, but I feel like a guy like Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest, like I said, cornerback, about 6 feet, 195, 200, pushing that range. But again, it's a nice solid piece. And looking at the guy again, he has 4.48 speed, so we're not talking about a speed burner necessarily, but it's not a slow guy either. So I'm very excited to see what athleticism he can bring, especially when these guys get around the veterans. Like I said, after mini camp, you have training camp, things like that. Kalen Carson is a guy to keep an eye on later on as the next season progresses. And in the 6th round, the Dallas Cowboys took wide receiver Ryan Flournoy, have to make sure I pronounce it the right way, out of Southeastern Missouri State University. This is a guy, he's 24 years old, so he's a little long in the tooth. We're talking about just progression. So this is hopefully a guy that you hope can come in again during training camp and just be able to push some of these DBs. We're talking about, obviously, mini camp is going to be the first site we get to see. This is hopefully a guy, I'm going to say, he's liking himself. He said he's heard he plays more very similar to a guy like Dez Bryant. I don't know if I see that on film, but this is a guy, he's about 6 feet, 6'1", about 200, 205 pounds. He does have 4.4 speed, and I believe has, 39.5-inch vertical. So this is a guy that has some athleticism. And when you watch him, especially we're talking about doing the combine process, you're watching pretty much when they're doing route running and just running down the line, catching the balls. He catches the ball comfortably. In film, sometimes you can see it get on him, but when you watch him, just live balls, he looks like he can play the receiver position comfortably. Obviously, you're going to come in and you have to learn, because this is a development process now, because you're talking about from college and Southeastern Missouri State. We're not even talking about like one of the Power 5 conferences or anything. But obviously, we do know you have talent throughout college football. It doesn't matter what the level is. So this is a guy I want to say, give him a chance and let's see what he can do. Obviously, you have many guys throughout the receiver position I felt during this draft the Cowboys should have taken a look at, because we do have some uncertainty right now with the CeeDee Lamb contract. We're also trying to figure out how deep we're going to be at receiver, because now you do know you're still having Brandon Cooks return. Jalen Tolbert, this is now not a season where we can say Jalen Tolbert has the potential. He has the potential. He has got to show up, because as of right now, Jalen Tolbert is looking like one of those guys in that top 3 on the wide receiver depth chart. All things pending, like I said, CeeDee Lamb's contract situation. You're gonna look at Jalen Tolbert. He has to take a major step above what he's been doing the last couple seasons. I feel like the last season was the first step in the right direction, because obviously you still have Michael Gallup and he's getting a few targets here and there. Jake Ferguson became more of a focal point in the passing game. Brandon Cooks, second half of the season, became more of a focal point, and we know what CeeDee Lamb is. We're talking about all-pro receiver. So this is something, Ryan Flournoy, if you're able to just keep an eye on a guy like this, just because, again, you never know. At the end of the day, we see guys that end up becoming impact players in this league throughout the entire draft. So you can't even just completely fall asleep on guys that are 5th, 6th round picks, 7th round picks even, because at the end of the day, it's about putting the work in. And sometimes some of those guys drafted ahead of you, they might not have as much of a chip on their shoulder as some of these later round guys. So Ryan Flournoy, it's very interesting to see a guy like this. I don't want to pile any expectations on him or anything. Again, we're talking about a 6th round pick, but he's going to have to come in here and compete with guys like Jalen Brooks, who we took last year in the draft. He's going to have some of these David Durden, a guy that I was kind of excited to see just what he could potentially bring to like a slot position, but a guy that got injured during training camp and wasn't able to show any of that work. We'll see what the Cowboys can do with a guy like Ryan Flournoy, but again, to me, it's a solid raw piece that I feel like the Cowboys are trying to build on. Going into day 3, the Dallas Cowboys had 2 7th round picks, and with the first 7th round pick, the Dallas Cowboys took offensive lineman. I'm going to say offensive lineman. He is listed as an offensive tackle, but apparently he says the Cowboys have ideas of moving him inside to the guard position. So I'm going to say maybe one of those swing guys, maybe can back up a guy like an all-pro Tyler Smith, and also we do know a future Hall of Famer, many time all-pro Zach Martin. His name is Nate Thomas, whichever way you choose to go with. I'm calling offensive lineman Nate Thomas with the first 7th round pick for the Dallas Cowboys in day 3 of this 2024 NFL draft. This is a guy about 6'5", 330 pounds. pounds, he has nice enough feet that he can actually be able to hold off defenders from the edges. So moving a guy like that on the interior, potentially, you're going to be able to say the number one thing you can see about his size is when he actually is able to get his hands on you, he can play to that size. And I feel like if we're talking about just getting more of a mauler, mentality from the interior especially, that's going to open up many things for the running game. Obviously, we can continue to talk about the Cowboys did not focus on getting a running back in this draft. But if you're able to bring in some more pieces and figure out what exactly you're looking to, I guess you want to say, find more of a consistent pattern or scheme for the Cowboys when it comes to the running game, a guy like a Nate Thomas, I'm going to say, is a big addition to adding just more depth on the interior, because you can't have too many big bodies when you're talking about the offensive line. Obviously, you're going to be talking about playing with guys like a Tyler Smith and Zach Martin. So there's going to be many things that he can kind of learn and pick up from these guys, as well as the coaching staff is going to be here too. So Nate Thomas, the first 7th round pick for the Dallas Cowboys, like I said, 6'5", 330 pounds. You can't coach size. You either have it or you don't. And if he plays to his size, plays to his potential, you're just looking for another guy that could potentially be a part of that rotation if ever needed to be called upon. And with the final pick for the Dallas Cowboys in 2024 NFL Draft, that second 7th round pick, the Dallas Cowboys select Auburn defensive tackle Justin Rogers, a guy about 6'3", 330 pounds, another huge human being. This is not anything I'm gonna say the Cowboys are as if this is something that the Cowboys are kind of keeping their eye on this guy throughout the entire draft process. I mean, at some point, the number one thing I always say when you get to the later round picks, which is why I don't feel like you can just completely write them off, is a lot of times when you start getting to that 5th, 6th, 7th round, you're looking for guys with traits that you like. It might not necessarily be production that they gave you in college. Justin Rogers is a guy, he started his first 3 years. He began his first 3 years of college at the University of Kentucky and then transferred to the University of Auburn. Excuse me, more of a rotational piece. And I'm gonna say, but when you 6'3", 330 pounds, if you're looking for a guy like that to be able to clog the line. We do know a guy like Mike Zimmer, obviously, he's looking to add more physicality on the interior, like I said, and that goes well along with the defensive line. And we're talking about just getting bigger and opening up things for other guys, especially if we're gonna run more of a regular standard 4-3 scheme. And it's already been thrown around a little bit that Micah Parsons probably going to play a little bit more linebacker than he has over the last couple seasons. And then adding in our linebacker, the draft pick out of University of Notre Dame, and then adding in back in a DeMarvion Overshown into the mix, and then seeing what a Damone Clark is going to do with this year. And I'm going to say it's going to be big for Damone Clark, but because he is going to have to step up. There's much more talent and much more being added to that linebacker room. So hopefully he's able to take another step up in his development. But he does have starter experience, so that's going to be big. But adding in just more physical bodies, because as of right now, you're looking at Oso Digizua. That's kind of like your only mainstay we're talking about from the defensive tackle position. So there's going to be lots of competition. I'm not writing anybody off, like I said, because when you get to these later round picks, the coaches, the coaching staff in general, the front office, all these guys up there making these roster decisions, you're looking for, just like I said, guys with traits. And you can't coach 6'3", 330 pounds. So if he's able to play to his potential, and I mean potential as in, I'm not calling him a starter or saying he's going to be competing for starting minutes or anything, or starting plays, in this rotation of the defensive tackle rotation. But if you get a guy like Justin Rogers, who could potentially just be a guy that you can kind of throw in there every now and then if need be in year one, I'm not hanging my hat on that or anything. But this is just a guy, again, with traits that the Cowboys found themselves to like. Maybe it's going to open up some things for the linebacker position, because we need as many big bodies as we can if we're going to play more physical than we became accustomed to, obviously, under the Dan Quinn system, which employs like a little bit more of a kind of using like a chess system. Tries to find a little trickery if he can kind of sneak guys here and there. Lots of stunning. If we're going to get more guys that are able to just hold their man up and open up lanes for some of the playmakers, like I said, a Micah Parsons, a DeMarvion Overshown, who I'm hoping. This is going to be something that's just going to be one more extra thing to keep your eyes on going forward as we get closer to training camp. As of right now, according to SI-SportsIllustrated.com, the Cowboys undrafted rookie signings right now, running back Nate Pete out of Missouri, University of Missouri, Brevin Spanford, tight end out of Minnesota, I believe about 6'6". So this is a guy that has some crazy size. We're talking about Corey Crooms, wide receiver out of Minnesota, also formerly a teammate of Marshawn Nealon, our second round pick at Central Michigan, I believe. Western Michigan, excuse me, Western Michigan. Jason Johnson, linebacker out of UCF. This is probably one of my most interesting prospects. I'm gonna say Jason Johnson, and also Amani Johnson, a 6-year safety out of the University of Nevada. He's talking about a very experienced guy, but somebody again to keep an eye on. These are always up in the air. You never know who's going to end up being a special teams player, who can be a guy that, again, that kind of just catches the coach's eye when they get around these other guys. Because at the end of the day, like I said, it's all about progress. It's all about development. You can be the first round pick and fizzle out way faster than the 7th round pick or an undrafted guy. You never know. So it's all about staying tuned in. But like I said, Solo Turner, DB out of Illinois. Cam Johnson, wide receiver of Northwestern. Denzel Daxon, defensive tackle, University of Illinois. Brock Morganson, linebacker, South Dakota. Byron Vaughns, an edge from Baylor. And this is also a guy from the DFW area, from Fort Worth, I believe. So Alec Holler, tight end out of UCF. Amani Johnson, like I said, safety out of Nevada. A guy I believe had 100 tackles and 3 interceptions in his last season at Nevada. So like I said, these are some interesting names. Again, obviously you never know who's going to stick, who's not, who's going to be a practice squad, or who's going to be somebody just cut and you never hear about again. So it's always very interesting to keep an eye on. Julius Woods, safety, East Carolina. And last but not least, Josh DeBerry, safety from Texas A&M. So again, these are some guys that the Cowboys have brought in to be on that undrafted rookie signings. We'll see if anybody sticks. But like I said, these next coming weeks are going to be exciting, because I believe rookie minicamp is usually not too far behind the wrap up and the finalization of the NFL draft. So there's going to be a lot to focus on, a lot to talk about, and we will definitely be getting into that. So that is the wrap up of the Dallas Cowboys and the 2024 NFL draft. There's so many things to keep our eyes on going forward. But like I said, it was a mixed bag of opinions after this draft. I personally felt the Cowboys hit on some things that maybe weren't even really talked about, but they were something that actually, when you think about it, they actually deserve some focus. But again, also, there is still a little disappointment that we did not bring in that running back. The talks have been going on, so we'll see exactly what the Cowboys do going forward. But like I said, rookie minicamp is not too far from now. We will be able to lock into that, and stay tuned. Like I said, I appreciate you guys for all the support. We have now hit 1,000 subscribers. The next goal is 2,000 subscribers. So go ahead and keep hitting that like button, keep sharing, keep commenting, keep throwing in your opinions. I appreciate you guys always. So always, like we say, go Cowboys, and enjoy the rest of your day.